Live here to chat about all of the TV that we've been watching for the last, I guess, 2 weeks, since we're on an every 2 week flow, an every 2 week pattern. And, normally at this point, Carrie, we start with the news, but let me tell you, there has been quite a lot of scandalous news, and it's not really TV related, but it's just unavoidable scandalous news these last few weeks. We've got the Try Guys trying adultery. We've got Adam Sandler thinking or is it Adam? What's that? Not Adam.
Levine,
Yes,
Levine.
some irrelevant old Adam who probably thinks he's like funny or attractive, but is it like trying to hit on Instagram girls? We have Hailey Bieber talking about Selena Gomez as if it's 2015. It's just been a wild time. Do you have any good news to bring to the table?
Well, yeah, I'm assuming you've heard the news about Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds are going to reconnect in
Yes.
Deadpool 3.
Are you so
Yeah,
excited?
yeah, I am, and it's like they have like a lot to live up to now, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I'm really excited. It'd be interesting to see how they incorporate it all. So yes.
I really love how they had like the initial, release video and it was so like carefully crafted to go viral. Like we can all see that. But the follow up, they knew exactly what everybody was going to say and everybody was going to ask and everybody's going to critique. And they already had, the follow up obviously pre filmed to go for that. I thought it was great.
Mm. I'm glad they did that because I'm not gonna lie. When I first saw the initial one, I was like, that's got to be a joke, right? Got to be a
Right.
joke.
There's
And so
gotta
yeah,
be
the
more
fact
to
that they
it.
followed up with it, I know. So yeah, because if it was a joke, it was not gonna go over well. So this had to be the real deal. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. It would be easy to make a joke about Marvel grasping at straws or something like that. But honestly, I think it's going to be great. And I've really appreciated slash enjoyed the Deadpool franchise and presence in general. I feel like it leans into the funniest side of Marvel. And I think funny is where Marvel has a good opportunity to succeed. So that's been kind of cool. You know what else we had, in the last week or so was, and I just hate having to say it, but Tadum, the Netflix con, the Netflix release of all, news in the next, coming whatever. And through that, we got teasers for Knives Out, The Glass Onion. I keep wanting to call it The Glass Menagerie, which is a whole other thing. We got teasers for goodness, what else? Was there anything from Netflix that came? We got Lupin. We got just everything that has to do the bloopers for Stranger Things season 4 plus a few little mentions and teasers of what's going to go on in season 5. Was there anything from that you saw that caught your attention?
This is news to me that because I like missed all of that. I've been sort of like in a vacuum of watching strange things that came out about feels like 10 years ago. So um, no, I missed all that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It's so like it kind of makes your stomach turn how like marketing heavy it is. But Disney does that with their, I can't remember what the latest one was, D23, D24, whatever. And then we've got Netflix that does that. It's just sort of this like it's a very long commercial with a very high budget essentially, but they put out a bunch of new promos for everything that's going to go down. We got our first look at Shadow and Bone, just all that kind of stuff, which I, for one, am so excited for Shadow and Bone season 2 because the book is so bad. I feel like the show has to improve it. Like, mark my words, date and time stamp 8/23, September 28. I challenge them to make a season 2 worse than the book. But we'll see where it goes with that. You're gonna hear more than you want to hear, Carrie, about Shadow and Bone in due time. But for today, we've got some exciting stuff to talk about, and none of it is Netflix. We have Andor on Disney Plus and She-Hulk on Disney Plus to kick us off today. So you tell me which one really stuck out to you most in the last week. Which one do we want to dive into first?
Let's go She-Hulk first.
Ooh, good
Um,
choice.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's such a pleasant, sunshiny show. Um, and what I thought was really cool. because I knew that everyone went into this episode expecting to see Daredevil, right?
Mhm.
And so they sort of leaned into that. It's like, yeah, we're taking this, and it wasn't like, hey, we're not giving you Daredevil, but it was basically like, hey, we're giving you something you didn't expect. Wink, wink to the camera. In terms of what they did with this episode, in terms of taking her to somebody's wedding during the middle of the week. I mean, who does that anyway, right? But I just thought I just really appreciate the way that this show gets ahead of quote unquote its trolls, right? And so I really dig and appreciate that. And the episode was fun. I mean, I thought it was cool.
The episode is really fun, and they were very meta about it, being like, is this not an inconvenient time for a self contained wedding episode? Like, they were just very on the nose about acknowledging what it was and really embracing it, which I liked. But one thing that really stood out to me is I'm watching it, and Carrie, if you know anything about me, you know that I'm the biggest wedding fanatic. You can give me the cheesiest one off wedding episode that will have everybody else gagging, and I'm a fan. I want to see the dresses and the flowers and the whole thing. I love a wedding episode. I love weddings, right? So watching this, I was just entranced. The drama, the uninvited guest, the bridesmaids, groomsmen, all of that. And I was really entertained the entire time. But by the time it got to the end, I was looking back and I was realizing how many, and I know we know this just from the first few She-Hulk episodes, how many very serious topics they really touch on. They were able to have this sort of a kind of cheesy, silly, she gets drunk at a wedding episode where everything feels very light and not too serious, but they're dealing with what is somewhat of an allegory, parallel, whatever figurative language term you want to use, to it's similar to a kill strike being organized on like 4chan or whatever the equivalent would be of very serious threats organized that are very much motivated by the target's, you know, demographics. Just a very dark, gross thing to think about that is very much aligned to real struggles in real life that people have to deal with. And the fact that they were able to merge these two and keep it light but also keep it engaged in the serious stuff. You didn't have a viewer like me tuning out the serious stuff and just eating up like the wedding drama, but if you were there for the very serious story of like what's going on with intelligentsia and what's, you know, whatever, you're still going to be entertained by the wedding. That balance, I think, was quite an extreme of action and comedy to try to force the furthest end of those two spectrums together, and they did it pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, like you said, it could have just easily been like something that you didn't have to pay. I don't want to say you didn't have to pay attention to, but you could have totally gone into it with like, this is going to be light, this is going to be fun, which it sort of was. But there were also some interesting points that were brought up. I really sort of, and this is sort of like, I don't want to say it was surface, but at the very beginning when Jen gets to the wedding, and I forget the name of the woman who was getting married. Let's call her Judith. I can't remember her name. But
I
when
don't.
when Jen, yeah, when Jen was talking about, you know, what she was doing and how successful, at least on the surface, that she felt, and the reply was, oh, but you don't have a relationship and you're not on this path to like wedded bliss and you must be a failure, right? And and it's just like, okay, bam, like you have all these really good things going on, and but yeah, you're a failure in that respect. Um, so I thought that was an interesting sort of thing to talk about in the very beginning, just sort of thing. But then, like you said, the intelligentsia thing, that's really like nasty and raw, and it's sort of like real. It's like a way of bringing real world into She-Hulk's world, and it's like the things that people in those positions, those situations, women entertainers, women in positions that men don't want to see them in, the vitriol that they have to sort of deal with, and that's some heavy stuff, right? And
Mhm.
you introduce it in like this fun-loving like wedding scenery. So yeah, I thought that was powerful too. I tell you what else I liked. I don't know, I'm jumping around here a little bit,
No, go for it.
but like her Jen's best friend in the office is her name. I think the actress is like Ginger Ramirez or something like that.
Hmm.
But I really liked the chemistry that she had with the other attorney when they were dealing with Mr. Immortal. It
The
just gave her
semi
an opportunity
antagonist.
to, yeah, 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 it just gave her an opportunity to sort of. She always shines when I think when she's on camera, but it just gave her an opportunity to shine with like somebody different that basically says, yeah, I do this really well, and so here's more of it, right? So I thought I really liked that too.
It was fun to see the side characters continue to shine even when, she's not there in the office and She-Hulk is not a present or an imminent present there in the room. We saw side characters shine at the wedding as well. I've been enjoying what's her name from The Good Place? Who's
Are we talking
playing
about
the
the antagonist,
yeah, the actual
Titania?
antagonist. What now?
Oh, Titania. Is that who we're
Titania.
talking about?
Um, Played by what's her name from The Good Place?
Jamila
Jam-
Jamil? Is that
yes, Jamila Jamil. I've really been enjoying her as well. And at the wedding, she again is sort of that she's comedic, but she's also the true antagonist, and she's beating her ass, and it's just kind of fun. It was also a good time. They mentioned that this whole wedding thing and traveling away from the office and all of this, it's an inconvenient time for it to happen, but having this happen allowed for them to explore the limits of her physical abilities. So, what happens if she is in a situation where she's pressured to not transition to She Hulk? Or what happens if she's drinking when she's not She Hulk? Just that kind of thing. It's nice early on to get to explore her in sort of a mild limit in this sense. And even though her friends were objectively awful ish during this, we do see a little bit of like, she's not totally estranged at the end. She doesn't, encounter the ultimate vitriol of the bride. Like there's still a little bit of feel goodness where it's like these are not going to be like best friends forever, but she hasn't alienated the entire world. And by having some of these comments of like, oh, you're still single or whatever late in life when all your friends are getting married, you're also kind of just defining a target demographic here. Like while this is on Disney Plus, this isn't necessarily seeming to be aiming for the teens and early 20s audience. This is solidly the midlife adult audience of, you're going to your friends' weddings and second weddings and this, that, or the other, and you don't have a partner, whatever. I found it interesting. There seemed to be a clearer definition there. She's also not really early career necessarily, which is kind of how I interpreted it early on in the show. She's first good job, not first job
right?
ever. So there's a level of competence there that they're putting behind her that I think makes her a very layered and interesting character. Well, let's talk a little bit about Andor, because it is quite a contrast from some of the strengths we see in She-Hulk. It is also a contrast from some of the weaknesses we see in She-Hulk. And I won't necessarily be getting into any spoilers in my discussion of Andor. I'm not at all opposed to spoilers, but I've only seen the first two episodes. And as I understand it, I think you've only seen the first episode. So we're more talking about the general tone of the show and the trajectory of it and the setting and the characters. But if anybody watching this now or later has seen episodes 3 or 4, we won't necessarily be touching on that. So tell me your thoughts on Andor.
My first thoughts about Andor is we've seen sort of all of the fantastical things that Star Wars is all about, right? Jedi and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know that we've always spent enough time with the sort of like everyday, day-to-day life of someone who's under the rule of an oppressive empire that seems to have like a galaxy wide reach, not just in like propaganda, but like legitimately they have like a thumb on people in their everyday life. And you get to sort of see the impact of what that has, and how vulnerable it makes all of the people who sort of live that sort of way, that basically at any moment, at, because of any whim, someone could decide to make you a target just because you exist, right? So I say all that to say that there is a vulnerability that you get to see in a show like Andor, when you sort of dealing with quote unquote regular people, right? that you haven't always seen in Star Wars because it's like, hey, someone's a Jedi and someone's coming to save you. In Andor, you get this real sense of like until something changes, it's all about saving yourself, taking care of yourself, and how sort of insulating that can be, and how vulnerable that can make you to things, and how gritty this show can be when it's sort of like on a surface level, like street level kind of deal. So that's what I really take away from Andor. It just feels real and lived in, and like you could see how living under that sort of oppression, like year after year, can just sort of beat you down and take away your hope, and how sort of incredible it has to be for anyone to say, I need this to be better and I'm willing to fight for it, because it's just easier just to say, I'll keep my head down and keep moving and try to survive, right? Um, so I like those aspects of what Andor brings to the table.
There were I kind of have a tongue-in-cheek mention in the title of this live about Andor being the Bachelorette, which is just kind of a joke about the fact that there's really one main woman that we're introduced to in the beginning and 5,000 guys, and likely, a good percentage of them are suitors or would be suitors of her. But jokes aside, there is something very interesting that the first episode slash first two episodes of Andor kind of starts to grapple with, and they don't push it in your face. It's something that, or at least to me, and I'm not the most always the most analytical and read too far into things viewer. So for what I'm going to call an average viewer and a pretty average Star Wars content consumer, where I can't list everything that's ever whatever, I have probably seen most of the main movies, but I'm what you would probably call a fake fan. Okay, low to medium analytical ability on this. What I found interesting that they led me to confront was this idea in the first two episodes of morality and being able to find and stick to your morality being something of a luxury, being something of a privilege, and how our main character Cassian, he has, we can kind of infer what his moral code would be, and he is not provided the privilege and luxury of actually sticking to his moral code. At multiple occasions, he is forced to kill, lie, steal, do bad things, whatever, to people he doesn't care about and to people he does, to people he doesn't know and people he does. And by having these flashbacks where we see him as a child, where as a child he is seeing bad things happen, he is seeing unfairness happen, he's seeing violence, whatever, and he's forced to, whatever childlike code of conduct he has, whatever innate moral ability and moral understanding he has as a child, has to confront the fact that he can't follow that. He is not given the privilege of following that. And then the impact that shows later on, it's just close enough, his age now in present day and his age in the past, that it gives this accessible, I'm going to say, like, easy, I guess, way of following this idea of generational oppression having consequences on the morality, the trust, the ability to bond and form relationships. So his ability to bond and form relationships, very even just in the first couple episodes, with whatever family he does have access to, with the droid he has access to, with what we all know is going to be his love interest, Bix. All of these are, it is made more difficult because of what he's been through, and they show you right on while doing this whole storyline, and while there's action and politics and whatever, the way they've shown that so clearly is very impressive, and they lead the viewer to making the connections. One way that they demonstrate, one very tangible way I've noticed that they demonstrate trust in the viewer to make connections, and I'm going to ask you if this is typical of Star Wars, because you probably know a lot more about Star Wars content than me. They don't define anything. So in the flashbacks, there's constant talking in another language, which is not a real language. I infer this is a Star Wars planet language, whatever, and they don't define it. They don't put subtitles on screen, but you know exactly what's happening. Is that typical in like all Star Wars media to not define like alien or other languages.
Yeah, it's just sort of like all context clues, right? It's what they did with like R2D2 with the beeps and all that stuff. And when someone's speaking to an alien, you obviously glean more by the context and by the response to what you get to that. So yes, they do that a lot. And for this, for Star Wars in general, it just sort of builds upon the fact of how big the universe is that we always hear these alien conversations and we don't always know what they're saying, but we get these context clues that gives us an idea of what it is. Um, because sometimes they don't have universal translators, right? So sometimes you may know the language that someone's speaking, and sometimes you may not. And so as a viewer, you're always sort of kept at a distance. Like, well, I don't understand any of it, but I'll glean what they're trying to say through context clues and that sort of thing. Um, I also wanted to go back to one of the things that you talked about, and I just sort of wanted to put it out there, right? One of the things that we've always sort of from like day one about Star Wars is that we're always as a viewer supposed to be rooting for the quote unquote rebels, the rebel scum, right? But um, in real life, in day to day life, rebels would not be the people that we're rooting for if you were just sort of like a general layperson, right? Because for the most part, you're going to see government like you see any government. It is just what it is, right? And then you have these rebels who, like we've seen and we'll get to see more of, make these decisions that seem to be, to a great degree, lacking morals. Because, like you said, they have to further their means. They have to lie, they have to steal, they have to cheat, they have to do all these terrible things. And these are the people that we're supposed to be rooting for, but they figured out a way to do it in the grand scheme of things. Now we just get to see it more in the dirt and sort of the more gritty layers of it. But again, in our everyday life, those aren't the people that we would necessarily be rooting for because, again, those are the people that would be going against what we consider sort of normal, mundane, routine, day to day life. And you have these rebels out here doing these things that do nothing but primarily make your life tougher because the oppressive government is now putting its thumb down harder on everyone, right?
Seeing themselves
So
as
I think
above
it's,
the law.
yeah, yeah. And so I think that's just because they always talk about the things that they have to do. It's called Star Wars for a reason. I mean, there's actual literal war, but they've sanitized it so much in so many other shows and movies that you really get to see its impact here. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I'm so interested to see where it goes from here because right now they've taken a bunch of threads and concepts, thrown them out there. They haven't thrown enough female characters in there, but they've thrown a lot of concepts and ideas out there. And they've got us starting to attach to these characters while from the jump having us question the societal structure, these characters' place in societies and place in multiple societies truly, and whether or not what they're doing is right at every turn. And they show our characters also questioning whether or not they're right at every turn. And also there's a potential for a really cute ship. I really, they definitely took some time with a capital T in the first episode and in the second episode to really have Cassian and Bix come face to face and do this whole like not enemies to lovers, but perhaps bickering to lover. We're on the bickering end. We haven't quite got to lovers yet, and she's got her, disposable boy toy who's inevitably going to die. I'm so sure.
So that's what I was going to ask because I only seen the one episode, and obviously there was an obstacle to that. So I mean, I don't think, like you said, I don't think it's an obstacle that anyone thinks is incredibly difficult to get beyond, but there is one. So
Yeah, he has all the markers of
here,
somebody who will die halfway through the season, in my opinion.
I will ask you this, and this isn't necessarily a spoiler, but has Mon Mothma showed up yet? By episode three.
Is
If
that
you know,
the older woman?
essentially the only woman in the entire galaxy other than Leia, right? But she's again, this isn't a spoiler because we know what happens, but she's ultimately like the leader of the rebellion other than Leia. And So if there is a woman in a position of authority and power who, or at least you can sort of sense that's coming, that's probably her.
Yes. Well, yeah. And yes, she has. She's this like
Okay.
older, like blonde lady there. She, if I'm getting at the right person, I'm looking at the cast list right now. There is one, and I think that's the one who showed up only in episode 2, and she's kind of, I don't know. I like her. She's abrasive. She has a strong perspective. Yes.
And okay, because the only reason I bring this up is because it's there's been this conversation about this show, and if you remember the movie Rogue One, if you think about all of the characters in Rogue One, other than Jen Erso, who would you have made like a series? Who would you put? Who would you have picked to have a series? And there are probably a few people who would not have put Cassian Andor first, right? Um, and so, the reason I bring that up is not to say that there should have been a series about Mon Mothma. It's just that there has been some criticism about how slow the first 3 episodes were, and I'm just wondering if it would have been different if they had decided to like focus the show around like someone else, like, and I forget their names, and I'm terrible at names, but you remember the one guy in Rogue One, he was blind, I believe, and he had the friend who like had like the really big heavy guns. They had a really cool friendship.
Yeah, maybe. It's been a while. I only saw it once, and
It,
it was like in theaters, so that's how long ago it
yeah,
was.
yeah. I think Donnie Yen was was the actor that played the character. Anyway, I just personally, I would have been really, really interested in a show around those two and their friendship and how they got to where they were. And I'm saying I don't want to watch an Andor show. I'm just saying if the criticism is that hey, this show is about someone that we didn't really care about, I'm just saying that those two probably would have solved that. But like I said, I've only seen the first episode and I liked it a lot, and I'm really interested in seeing this entire series. So
Thus far,
there
everything
you
I've seen has led me to be really open to this idea of an ensemble cast because I wouldn't say necessarily that the main character is the most interesting character, but I think they just really want you to attach to him so that you can attach to his people. And they show that in present day and they show that in the flashbacks. And so far, that's kind of worked for me. I mean, they do a good job, and I'm not a big flashback person, but they do a good job of like showing these kids and showing the it's been that way a while, right? They do a
go. No,
good
I'm just
job.
laughing at you. I'm just laughing at you for saying you're not a big flashback fan. Arrow, anyone?
Yes, I was not a what you guys can't see is Kate has joined the call. I can see that she's laughing us right now. Let's go ahead and bring her on screen now. Um I've never been the hugest flashback fan, but if anybody's going to do it well, it's probably going to be Star Wars slash Disney Plus, and that's definitely what we see here. And by focusing on this child who is spoilers for episode 2, one of the least useful children in the flashbacks thus far on any mission that they're encountering, we are still starting to care about these people in general. For a show, I will say, for a show with very few women, I will still say it's a very pretty cast as well. There's a lot of very nice looking people. Kate, welcome to the show. We kicked this. Well, first of all, let me tell you, we're talking about Andor. I don't think you've seen it, but we're not going over too many deep spoilers. We both have just watched the first, in my case, 2 episodes. In Carey's case, 1. We did kick the show off with some news, but you are the news expert, so let's do a little news intermission here. Is there any news we should hear about mid-show before we dive into some specifics of what we watched this week?
I don't really have any specific news to bring forth other than just comments on things I've watched this week and a movie I completely forgot I watched, but I have watched a movie and a TV show but brought no news.
Well, let's dive into what you watched this week then. And then, Carey, you're on the docket next because I already happen to know a little bit about what Carey's bringing on his weekly viewage, and I'm very excited to talk about it. So tell us, what is this mystery movie you watched, and what is this mystery TV show you watched?
Okay, so for the movie, I watched Do Revenge, which was the movie I've mentioned a couple times. Um, it was really good actually. The first half kind of had me in this moment of I don't know if this is going to be my favorite. It's fine. It's just not my thing. It's not my genre, whatever. And then the plot twist happened. I was like, okay, you have my attention now. It's a goofy. It turns very camp after the second half in the best way possible. It the other things about the movie, the music, the scoring, everything else was fantastic. The thematic callbacks to other 90s movies, other movies with similar storylines were great. The cameos just throughout the entire movie were just hilarious to see all these people, star-studded people playing very random, interesting roles. And it did surprisingly ask a lot of questions and like pose a lot of moral quandaries about certain situations with both how like high school is structured, but also the typical '90s movie with a high school setting. It's talking more about actual society rather than just high school. It had a lot of interesting commentary about how we use people in relationships in society. And it was just a really good movie. I highly suggest it if you're interested in watching something both funny and very dark humor. When it comes to the resolution and just kind of accepting certain weird tropes. It was very fun though. And then for the TV show I watched this week, I watched Critical Role. Who is surprised? Nobody. Um, just the quick catch up. There's more that happens than just Imogen, but just like if we haven't already prefaced this, it's pretty much all I'm going to talk about is Imogen. So to get after the cliffhanger that was the last episode where everybody was almost dead, three people were on the cusp of death and two people were able to be resurrected or brought back. But one did officially die, and that was Laudna, who is the most important person to Imogen. Imogen is the one who is basically Storm meets Scarlet Witch, and she has a bit of a moment where she basically destroys the entire city block. Just an oopsie. But we do get, because of this, a really interesting intermission where we get to see moments from all the characters' childhoods, which gives us a little bit of a hint into a lot of our other mysteries about everybody. After that, they kind of do a run sequence where we're trying to hide, trying to get out of the city. They've accomplished their mission, for better or for worse, and now they are just trying to get back home. On their way home, some fun escapades do happen on the ship. The captain is most resembles I cannot remember the movie character. It doesn't matter. Let me just move on. The captain of the ship is hilarious, but they get home and they kind of sort out the prisoner they have captured and are basically trying to find anybody who can bring back Laudna, resurrect Laudna from death. They have certain connections, both with the person that they're hired from, as well as a connection Orm has to his people. So his people are the Arashari, the same people that Keyleth now rules over. Keyleth being from Campaign 1, Legends of Vox Machina. So there is a bit of a inter-campaign connection there, and while they're trying to find other quicker answers, none of those seem to pan out in the way they thought they would, and essentially Imogen and Orm figure out a way to contact Keyleth and basically beg for help, and when she finally has a chance to get to come talk to them, she opens a doorway, steps through a tree, which is her mode of transportation, and is taking them to Whitestone. If anybody knows anything about Critical Role, that is a massive thing. We're basically going to get to see most of the the Campaign 1 characters again, which is so exciting. Yes, Campaign
Okay, I have two questions.
Yes.
Question number one. Were they
Hmm.
teasing Lagna, I'm getting her name wrong. Were they teasing her dying because they were teasing perhaps one of the actors leaving the show? Or was this like a fake death and everybody knew it was a fake death? Also, Stormy in the chat says, super late to the show. Hi, everyone. Stormy, you are right on time. And hello. Okay, that was question number one. Go ahead.
So no, Lagna is dead. It was a dice roll type situation. She died simply because the situation was so intense and brutal. But it posed this really great opportunity uh, for them to reach out to basically the most powerful magical people they know, which is the Critical Role Campaign 1 characters.
So the person who
Um,
played
they
Lagna could potentially like come back and play like her
so
original
the
character
funny
from
thing,
Critical Role or whatever it was.
the funniest part about that is there's a weird trifecta happening where Ladna is played by Marisha, who also played Keyleth. So Marisha's character is going to have to revive Marisha's character. And alongside that, there's parallels such as Laura's character, Imogen, is the most upset about the death. She is very much on she's on a mission right now. She will not be stopped, and has very minor Briarwood vibes about it, uh, wanting to break the world. Yes.
I should be more careful raising my hand because I haven't shaved my armpits recently. Okay, question number two has to do with Do Revenge. But before I ask it, Carey, did you watch Do Revenge?
I did not.
Okay, we're gonna kind of spoil it. So my
No
question
worries.
My question for you is because in a supreme plot twist, I actually watched what Kate recommended to me in a timely manner. And literally, like the second she recommended it, I watched Do Revenge. It was fantastic. So good. Anyways, my question for you has to do with something you're very specific about when you watch things, which is you have what we've referred to here on our little live chats as like a stubborn sense of justice. This movie, which I love, does not take a classic sense of justice, which is to say, not everybody faces what might be considered the best or most measured consequences for their actions. There is a theme of consequences. There is a theme of crap you do when you're younger will come back to you when you're older, even if you forget about it, even if you think you escape it, or, even if you think you rose above your previous social station or socioeconomic class, there's going to be things that come back to haunt you, or even if you think that you're up here, all of that. They play with this idea of consequences, but the characters don't actually experience consequences measured to their actions. And people get, and this is where I talk about spoilers, people get something of kind of sort of a happy ending, even if they're like maybe bad people. I'm okay with
Mm-hmm.
it because I love a villainess getting away with stuff. But how did you feel about the theme of consequences?
So typically when I get such a strong justice sense, it comes from like the superhero supervillain storylines where if you're going to challenge, if you're going to introduce gray morality, you have to do it with intention. And honestly, I get frustrated with such strict structures of hero versus villain because I think it restricts a really interesting story. With this, it was almost a flagrant opposite decision where there was really only one true punishment, whereas everybody else, for the most part, has able to been recover and move on with their lives in different shapes and forms, but they weren't handed a strict "this is your punishment," which, as wild as the second half of the movie was, I actually kind of think that that is a accurate representation of what happens in real life.
Mm-hmm.
People get away with some really messed up stuff, and some people get caught, and some people are breaking the law, and some people are just really hurting other people. The thing also is, though, the person that I know we're both referring to, so I'll just go ahead and say it. Sorry, Carey, if it's a spoiler. But Eleanor. So
Yeah.
that character is the one that initially comes off as the most innocent character and is not the most guilty, but probably second most guilty of manipulation and tormenting others. But she gets the vindication of forgiveness, um, because she finally switches sides and basically uses her information to protect others. And it is an interesting analysis on like the reversal of one bad deed condemns you, one good deed saves you type scenario. But more honestly, I think it was an interesting kind of analysis on how much Eleanor formed as a reckoning to Drea, and they both had to come to terms with their faulty personality, like their flaws. And once they both had to confront how terrible they had been to other people and how much it was hurting them to hurt other people, they were able to kind of rekindle their friendship and move forward in a bit of an exaggerated way, for sure. But it was an interesting discussion on who got consequences and who didn't.
It was also fun to see them be pretty terrible, but also take down men at the end. So that kind of PEMDAS balances things out. I absolutely adored the movie. It was by the creator of Sweet Vicious. And if you want a fun little self contained TV show from the last few years that's not going to read as super old, but also isn't going to be like, it's a 2022 self contained TV show that mentions COVID every 2 seconds. Sweet Vicious is it. Watch it. Fantastic. 10 out of 10. Carey, you have avoided the hot seat long enough. You're up. Tell us what you watched this week.
Well, I'm pretty sure what you're interested in. What I watched this week was I started watching the second season of Only Murders in the Building, um, which is I think I'm up to episode 4. Um, I think I watched yeah, I think it's episode 4, and I think it was episode 3 that was the one that was focused on Bunny, which I really really enjoyed. I thought it was fantastic because it took a character who, for the most part, I had only sort of paid attention to on a surface level in terms of how, like, our three main characters sort of reacted to her or thought about her or whatever the case was. And this episode took an opportunity and it humanized her, and gave her, sort of, I guess, the bottom line in it gave you a reason to care about the fact that she was killed, right? Because I think those sorts of things matter. Because if you're doing a murder mystery about someone and if you don't care about that person, then I don't think you care much about, like, I guess what we're talking about, and that's the justice that happens from that in terms of catching who did it, right? I mean, certainly you can be interested in why the main characters are trying to find the murderer in terms of their story and that sort of thing, but it certainly helps when you are able to sort of, see the person that's at the center of what we're talking about. So I thought that episode was really cool and really well done. Um, and strangely enough, it's obviously I would not have been watching these at the same time if I'd watched them when they came out. But while I'm watching, Only Murders in the Building, obviously watching Stargirl as well, which is doing a season-long story about a murder mystery. So it's almost impossible not to see the parallels. And I'm not going to compare the two shows because they are incredibly different shows and they sort of have different, things that they're trying to accomplish. But at the heart of a murder mystery and trying to solve it, it's hard not to sort of see, I guess, parallels that you think could be there or should be there, or some of the shortcomings is not the right word, but you see how one show handles the murder mystery and intrigue and suspense and drama and comedy and all of that, and then you obviously, for lack of a better word, compare it to something else that you're watching at the same time that's sort of dealing with the same thing. Um, and to that point, when you're talking about Stargirl, they're trying to solve a murder because ultimately they're superheroes, and that's what superheroes do, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I've always liked about Only Murders in the Building is that they are taking on this role of solving murders, not because they're heroes or cops or that sort of thing, in terms of this is what we do, but there was an active decision and an active reason why each one of them wanted to take part in doing this, both in the first season and obviously now. That I think it just um, makes it a little bit more interesting because it's like, hey, if you've got like a cop out solving a murder, yes, that's great, and that's what cops are supposed to do. But when you take that and sort of put it to like regular, quote unquote, ordinary day folks who are doing the same thing and dealing with the insanity of all that, I think it just adds a different layer to it.
Mhm.
So that's what I've been watching these past 2 weeks and can't help but sort of compare and contrast the two.
What's interesting is, as you mentioned, these two shows are targeting slightly different demographics, but not entirely different demographics. It's not like there's a complete lack of overlap. And through this, through the story format that they both choose, they they have a similar template, but they take it such different directions. I think it also kind of hinges on how they have chosen to frame their main character. The level of goodness that is ascribed to Courtney and the level of goodness that is ascribed to Mabel are very, very different. We're not led to believe that Mabel is somehow inherently good or inherently philanthropic or inherently heroic. I mean, there were multiple points throughout both of the first two seasons where Kate and I were like, "Are we supposed to potentially see Mabel as a villain or the villain?" Which I never would. Absolutely not. Mabel's never done anything wrong a day in her life, but just kind of wondering through that. And we never go through a show like Stargirl and wonder if Courtney is a villain, even though she brings villains, quote unquote, on her team.
And I think it sort of speaks to what the motivation is, right? It's like you can have the, like you said about Courtney. I mean, we sort of know what she's about and why she does what she does. And of course, I don't know how this season two is going to turn out, but what I've always appreciated about it is we know what Mabel, Charles, and Oliver, right? What they're trying to do, but their motivation could be that not that I'm the killer, but I'm also sort of like doing this for a reason that benefits me, right? So it's like it might not be altruistic, but it's interesting nonetheless, right? And ultimately they're doing good, but the question always is, well, why exactly are they doing that? What's their motivation? What are they and in a lot of ways also what are they trying to hide? Because there's still a lot of mystery about I think each of the characters that
Hmm.
slowly gets revealed, but not fully and completely. So I think that sort of adds to the mystery part of a murder mystery as well when there's shades, right? Um, and so that's what I appreciate on that show also.
Who they trust, who they distrust, who they decide to trust again after this person has initially broken their trust.
Right.
Everybody from
Yeah.
the trio on Only Murders in the Building, by the end of season one, and certainly even at the start of season two, they have these moments of breaking each other's trust. It's sometimes mild, it's sometimes minor lies, it's sometimes just walking away or, just not always having each other's back. But this is not a trio with ultimate loyalty or heroic loyalty at every step. It's a loyalty that builds a bit over time and can stand up to temporary back turns, but it's very new and it's not built on some inherent moral righteousness as opposed to the JSA, which, as the name would suggest, is built on this inherent righteousness such that they can take people who were, they're villains, villainesses in the comics, they are the kids of villains or villainesses in the comics, whatever, who may have some inherent moral badness, but because they are put as part of the young JSA or new JSA or whatever, there's like a moral code they have to follow. I think it's a very interesting contrast. I got very excited when Carey brought it up.
And
Well,
it's funny because I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the whole we've kind of talked about this several times today and previously about how, like with Arrow, we had Oliver kind of doing a lot of detective work sometimes too with the team, but he all the time kind of got caught up in the what is my moral code here. He was too attached to that, and it got in his way a lot of times about like, why am I doing this? What's too far? And if I'm a hero, and we also see that in like Spider-Man, Superman, Captain America, the moral code, the actual principles in which they execute by versus their efficiency is a question that's so often asked in superhero shows that have a mystery bent to them. Whereas if it's this mystery show that's based just with regular old people, um, they don't have the same level of having to like compare their own morality to the morality of being a good guy or hero. They both convert to the fact of maybe I've gone too far, maybe this is bad, this, that, and the other. We have had Mabel even question, could I have done this? But I think it is an interesting dynamic of the comparison between these two about how much more they're able to focus on other things than just their morality of being interested in this, because as much as there's so much mystery behind like their connections to the story, and we've talked about why they care, there is an intrinsic part about we all understand because they live there, because they have their own personal genes in it, rather than because they want to be the heroes. And I think that's an interesting dynamic to also consider and possibly point to why it's a more successful show in the mystery storytellings.
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of like two things that are really interesting to me, and this goes back to the bunny episode, and again, not knowing if the killer gets revealed this season or not. But I thought it was telling when they talked about when Bunny came to bring the champagne to help them celebrate, and they didn't let her in, right? And it's like they didn't kill her, but they also didn't save her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, in that respect, I mean, it's like they're not killers, but kind of sort of, because at that particular moment, they were sort of like self congratulatory and insular and didn't bring someone in who they knew sort of needed it at that moment, and they didn't. And we saw what that led to. Not to say that she would not have gotten killed eventually, but it probably wouldn't have been that night. Um, and then going back to the very beginning of the series, you just think about how randomly these three people sort of got together for this particular reason. If the power was it the power, I think the power went out, and they sort of had to let go and congregate. And then, of course, they had this connection through this podcast. And think about if that didn't happen, that doesn't happen. They don't make that connection. They're not together, and it's hard to imagine their world where they are now, where they're not in it with each other, right? But if that had happened, they would still have just gone on like day to day life and not had this. And so that sort of speaks back to just sort of like normal, regular, everyday folks who get together for whatever reason it is and have this purpose, but it's still not always black and white.
It's interesting to see who comes together, who makes a team, and how do you make people of different moralities come together for a team that may or may not, have a moral purpose, which in the case of solving a murder is ultimately a moral purpose, even if there are amoral reasons or immoral reasons to also do that. Well, you guys have had such great discussion that there unfortunately will not be time to recap every single thing that occurred on Bachelor in Paradise this week. I know that you are heartbroken about that. But Bachelor in Paradise has kicked back off. I just want to use my couple minutes to remind everybody to watch Abbott Elementary. It is literally the only 100% good and heartwarming thing on TV tonight, and it is airing live actually now as of 11 minutes ago and streams on Hulu the next day. And it is so, so good. It won an Emmy. And last week we saw the season premiere of season 2. So good. We got some teases this week that they're also going to have holiday episodes, like a Halloween episode. I'm beside myself. And also, ship is thriving. They're not thriving. Actually, she's heartbroken because she and her boyfriend just broke up, but that's one step closer to her ending up with the guy that she's supposed to end up with. So it's fine. Suck it up. Drink a bottle of wine and get back out there. And by back out there, I mean the teacher in the classroom next door. Questionable ethics of that aside. According to the try guy who cheated on his wife, you can have a consensual workplace relationship, so it'll be fine. That was a very specific, timely reference to this week for those who have followed pop culture.
Mm-hmm. I found out about it because of your tweet, and then I couldn't stop finding out about it.
Literal train wreck. Okay, so first of all, despite all of my comments on like fictional TV, like how in the year 2022 is anybody dumb and self-hating enough to get with a coworker? Number two, his entire brand is based on like loving his wife and kids. So in the span of like one day, he lost his job, lost his brand, probably lost his wife, probably lost custody of his kids. The whatever like employee of his who he was signing her paycheck, gross, who he cheated on with, is not trying to be with his nasty unemployed self now, and he has the entire internet coming together to make fun of the first name Ned. So I had a great time, but like kind of sucks for him. Brought it on himself. Zero empathy.
Yeah. I mean, well, take it one step further. I'm pretty sure. Well, first of all, don't date your coworker that just invites so many issues. But also, right. I think his wife actually worked for the company as like a separate branch or something like that. Like I know she was on a separate podcast for them. So, and I'm sure that the other coworker knew her directly. Like there is such a messy decision that messed up so many things.
Yeah, disgusting. Also, how are you that dumb at your big age? Like, you're not 19, like, dating somebody who works at Sonic with you. Like, I don't know. Let me stop before I say something mean. The narrator, she's actually been mean for the entire past hour. We got 60 seconds left, so I'm not going to get into House of Dragons because I can't recommend it. Watch Abbott Elementary and go ahead, Carey.
I was just going to tell you, I just started watching Game of Thrones. I'm only forever late, so yeah, I just started.
Terrible. You're not going to have a good time. I quit it after 2 seasons, but I'm absolutely loving House of Dragons so far, which is terrifying because I'm going to hate when it's like ripped from my grasp and becomes inevitably awful. But YOLO, I guess.
See, I love Game of Thrones. It's just that all the people are terrible, but I feel like that's on purpose.
Yeah. You know, if I started watching Game of Thrones today rather than like, I was a different person like a decade ago or whatever it was when it started. I think it was like almost a decade ago. Like I was less tolerant of like things I didn't like. I've mellowed out with age. I can tolerate one thing per episode that pisses me off. So thus far, I've been good with House of Dragons, and they actually have women on there, which is like great for now until they start doing terrible things to them. So good stuff. We are exactly at the 1 hour mark. Thank you guys for joining me this week. Thank you to Stormy, anybody else who watched live or is watching later. You can find Carey and Kate's information in the description down below if you want to talk to them about any of the shows that they watched or things that they did this week. And I'm Cammien Ray if you want to come fight with me on Twitter about my opinions. And I will talk to you all in 2 weeks. Bye.